Welcome to the Burnt Breast Homestead channel. In this video, we talk about the differences between living in an apartment and a house during a poop hits the fan scenario. There is a huge difference living in a house versus an apartment for prepping. Capacity, people, security and defense, bugging options, backup solutions, food and gardening, as well as how economic hardships are handled are the many differences. So stay to the end of this video to understand how losing your job impacts you differently when you own a house versus when you live in an apartment. And to be honest, I did not want to live in an apartment during a recession, depression, or collapse. But at the time, that was my only option. Therefore, I wanted to assess my situation and figure out how I could survive in the middle of a catastrophic event while living in an apartment. Although it did not look good, I started devising plans to work with other tenants. And I also mapped out design of the apartment complex to figure out the weak spots and what areas needed to be guarded. The way the apartment complex was designed, it would take half the complex tenants to participate in guarding the place. So participation would have been very key at that point in time. Also, it's worth noting that whether you live in an apartment or house, it will be hard to survive alone, especially if you live in or near a city. And it's true for the suburbs and rural areas as well, but specifically if you live near a city. You want trusted family members and friends around you. Together, you will watch each other's backs as well as provide each other with social comforts. That's what we as human beings do. So before we get started, I ask that you give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you frequently watch my videos. That is the best way you can help support this channel in its growth. Capacity. Having a studio or one-bedroom apartment, even a two-bedroom apartment, is much different than having a 2 to 4 bedroom house. Some houses have a basement, attic, garage, and or shed, thus tripling or quadrupling the capacity to store things. And no, I do not mean hoarding things that you don't need. I now at my house have ample space to store preps, unlike when I was living at my apartment. Living in an apartment, find areas to store food and water, such places as in the closet, pantry, the storage compartment underneath your couch, which I did have, and I did store food in that compartment when I was living in an apartment. Other places you could store food and water is under your bed, in crates, totes, or 5-gallon buckets. Consider renting a storage unit nearby to store some preps. This could be your stop to grab what you need on your way to your final bug out location if something were to happen. Be discreet when storing preps in your off-site unit. People. You do not get to choose the people that live in your apartment complex with you. Likewise, you do not get to choose your neighbors when you own a house either. However, the difference is physical markings that define boundaries or property lines, and there are laws that allow you to protect your house and property. Living in an apartment complex, you do not have these same boundaries. You do not have much to say in the apartment you live in. Your landlord basically owns everything but your belongings. So it is worth getting to know your neighbors in your apartment complex, because these are the people that may be the only ones around to protect you in the event that something takes place and you have no safe way of leaving your apartment complex. Try to get a feel for those who live in your apartment now. Maybe have a social gathering to break the ice. Try to build a rapport, have discussions on what you as tenants can do to protect the complex should things go to crap. But be careful what information about yourself you disclose. Remember, don't make yourself a target, as you do not know these people. You may greet one another when you come and go from your apartment complex, but that's about it. You could be living next to a career criminal. You just don't know. So be careful. Security. It is easier to implement security on property you own versus an apartment complex owned by someone else. You can't take it upon yourself to set up surveillance cameras, barricades, or traps, at least not while there is still a rule of law. If you know you have nowhere to go if a major event were to happen, it would be in your best interest to develop a plan of action to secure the apartment complex you're living in with the others. This may not be easy if you have stubborn people, those who are not willing to work together, or those who do not think such an event could even ever happen. If you find people to work with, maybe consider including someone with a military background, law enforcement, or security background to devise a plan. That plan should include ways to beef up security in an apartment to keep bad guys such as marauders, criminal groups, and the unprepared out of the complex. Knowing the entrance and exits and keeping them guarded at all times is key, as well as knowing the people who live in the apartment complex is important to know who the bad guys and the good guys are coming and going from the apartment. Having the necessary tools and equipment to deter as well as to stop the bad guys is also very important. I was single when I lived in my apartment, so I knew that I could be a target in the event something went down. Or I could be a target just in general. Single women and the elderly should really take security serious. Make sure doors, windows, and so forth cannot be easily compromised. I closed and locked my balcony sliding door every night. I made sure my front door was locked and the security latch was on. If anyone tried to break in, I would at least be alerted and had time to react. So make sure your doors and windows are secure and know that most apartments have weak doors that can easily be kicked in. Look into making them more secure. Escape. Apartments have limited ways in or out for the most part. The only options I had were the door and the balcony sliding door and window, which were on the second floor. But I knew if I needed to, I could lower myself over the balcony and drop down safely if the door was compromised. That may not be an option for children, elderly, or the disabled. So know your escape routes. If you live in a high-rise apartment complex, know all the areas you can access the stairwells in the event one may be inaccessible. Consider investing in escape ladder and ropes if you live on the second or third floors, but talk to experts to identify other ways to escape from higher floors. Most of the apartment complexes I stayed at or visited have long hallways. Know that you do not have much cover when walking these hallways. Also, practice walking up and down steps to your floors if you live in a high-rise complex. You never know if the elevator will be out and for how long, especially if we have blackouts and power outages. Now, if you live in an apartment complex but made arrangements to travel to an alternate location should an event take place, know various routes to get to said alternate location. In preparation, go on hikes to increase your stamina. Don't expect you will be able to escape by vehicle in the poop hits the fan scenario. Know the distance from your apartment to the safe location you are traveling, if it comes to that. Practice hiking that distance on hiking trails. Then at some point, practice the trek from your apartment to the destination. Be mindful of your surroundings, what towns you will be walking through, whether or not you will be traveling during the day or at night, whether or not it is best to stay on or off the main roads. This will be determined by how far into the event or incident before you travel. If you leave right away, maybe it will be less dangerous. Desperate people on the road. If you travel, let's say 3 weeks from when in which an event were to occur, maybe it will be ideal to travel by the cover of night. So it kind of depends on the situation. As for me, my plan was to leave my apartment complex as soon as possible if I could, whether by car or by foot. My destination was approximately 21 miles. To prepare for this, I hiked 1 to 3 times a week, 7 to 18 miles each time. I hiked both during the day and at night with my backpack. And no, I did not do so alone. And lucky for me, I enjoy walking and hiking. Backup solutions such as backup power and generators. None of the apartment complexes I lived had a backup power generator, nor could we run a generator. My apartment complex experienced a power outage for approximately 18 hours during the winter when temperatures dipped below freezing. I didn't have any backup heating, but I did have a wool blanket and a crank radio to get me through the evening. I used my camping supplies to warm up leftovers for dinner. At some point the next afternoon, power was restored. Instead of complaining or leaving, I used that time to test my winter camping equipment. I wasn't in any danger. I could have driven to a friend's or family's house at any time. Likewise, in some areas, the summers are just as brutal. Know of ways you can cool or warm yourself during power outages, whether it be winter or summer. Maybe your complex has a laundry room in the basement to keep you cool during the summer. Maybe you can invest in the Mr. Buddy heater to keep you warm during the winter. But plan for prolonged power outages. Food and gardening. This is going to be tough for many people, but doable. For many, they would need to buy food and store in every nook and cranny they can find in their apartment. Purchase grains in bulk and on sale. Buy meat, fruit, vegetables on sale, then can, ferment, or dehydrate them and pack them anywhere you can. In addition to that, my apartment complex had a courtyard where we could grow food. The courtyard could easily be protected from outsiders coming to take the food. There were also areas to grow outside of the courtyard that could also be easily protected from our balconies. However, many apartments, especially those in the city, may not have space to grow food on the ground, but there may be an option to do so on the roof. Also, some apartments like in my area, have wooded areas or are near wooded areas. Maybe you can grow a secret food forest in those areas. Most people do not know how food looks as it grows. They only know which aisle to get their perfectly packaged food from a supermarket. Also, don't underestimate the amount of food you can grow in your windowsill or on a balcony. That is how I started growing food, was on my balcony. Also, food like sprouts, you do not need any light to grow, and sprouts are packed full of vitamins and nutrients. Economic hardship. When times are hard and you can't pay your rent, the landlord can and will likely start eviction procedures as soon as possible. Living in a house buys you a little more time. Typically, mortgage companies have processes and procedures in place to assist homeowners experiencing economic hardships. Also, foreclosures can take months to years to complete. Notice of default takes about 90 days. On top of that, the paperwork, court proceedings, and so forth take a while. But this varies from state to state, so do your own research. Hopefully you do not find yourself in this situation. Make sure to have an emergency fund set aside to pay your rent in the event of job loss. However, if you become financially unstable, talk to your landlord ahead of time. They may be able to temporarily reduce your rent, waive a month rent, and so forth. Or perhaps you have a skill set that is of value to your landlord, where you are able to negotiate reduced rate in exchange for your labor. Now, I am not an expert in apartment prepping, but these are the things that concern me that I work to address. And here I am sharing them with you so that you can assess your situation and try to make plans to be prepared for both you and your family. Let me know in the comment section areas I might have missed. I hope that you have found the contents of this video useful. If so, please consider sharing this video with a friend or family member. Post it on your Facebook or website. These are things that will help this small channel to grow. Thanks for watching.